Hi everyone. This video is a book review in celebration of Black History Month, and it is also a book that I have had not too long, just maybe about a year or so. And the title of this book is The Secret Garden of George Washington Carver, and it was written by Jean Beretta and illustrated by Frank Morrison, who's one of my favorite illustrators. Now, I selected this book for about 3 reasons. One, because it's, Black history, so I wanted to find something related to Black history. Number 2, I missed the anniversary of Dr. Carver's death last month. He died January 5th, 1943, and I wasn't able to do some type of celebration for him, so it's a belated celebration. The third reason is that I have always been a fan of George Washington Carver and his legacy. It's the dead of winter outside, it's ice, it's snow right now, and I just wanted to find a book that reminded me of spring. And every time I read about George Washington Carver, I just think of springtime, summer, plants, life everywhere, and that is why I selected this book. I have been a fan of him since I don't know how old I was probably a teenager. I made a painting of him, which I donated to the library in 2007, and I often like to visit the Carver Garden at the Missouri Botanical Gardens. So I'm going to pause right here and show you a picture of the painting I made in 2007. I was about 17 years old, and also a photograph of the Carver Garden in St. Louis, Missouri at the Missouri Botanical Gardens. So I'm going to pause right here. Okay, I am back. So before we get into this book review, I wanted to share with you a little bit about the author as well as the illustrator. I don't know if these biographies are up to date, but I'm going to read them anyway. So the author, Jean Beretta, it says, Jean Beretta is an award-winning author and illustrator of children's books. Among his honors are the Carolyn W. Field Award and the Bank Street Cook Prize honor. His books include Lincoln and Kennedy, A Pair to Compare, Now and Then, The Modern Inventions of Benjamin Franklin, and Dear Dear, a book of homophones. Jean has contributed illustration and animation to Sesame Street and Between the Lions. He has also designed characters for the Jim Henson Company. He lives in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. You can visit him online at www.jeanberetta.com. Now, I did go to his website, and it's one of the most fun websites I've ever been to for, an author illustrator. When I went to go look for the books that he had written, I had to scroll down, and there was a digital librarian there being like, hey, these are the books that he has to offer. He also has a page that pays tributes to the people in his life that inspired him. One was George Washington Carver. There were 2 of the Beatles. There was I want to say Leonardo da Vinci. I didn't know that he was an illustrator. I didn't know that he was an artist until I went to his website. And what was interesting was I've actually read maybe 2 of his books, and I was like, whoa, this guy is a jack of all trades. I didn't know that his brother also worked for the Muppeteers or the Muppets. He just had a very interesting life, so you should check out his website. It's really fun, it's very whimsical, and I just had fun scrolling and going through the user design. The next person that I want to tell you about is Frank Morrison, and this is the illustrator. Frank Morrison is the award-winning illustrator of many books for young readers. including Jazzy Ms. Mozetta by Brenda C. Roberts, winner of the Coretta Scott King John Steptoe Award, and John Steptoe was a really good illustrator. He wrote Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters. For new talent, he also illustrated Little Melba and Her Big Trombone by Catherine Russell Brown, and Let the Children March, which I also have a video of Let the Children March, by Monica Clark Robinson, both Coretta Scott King Illustrator Honor Books. Before becoming a children's book illustrator and fine artist, Morrison toured the globe as a hip-hop dancer. He lives in Georgia with his family. You can visit him online at morrisongraphics.com. Now, I love Frank Morrison's work. I know I have a couple of books over there that have his work on it. I think I've done a book review on maybe a few of the books that he's either written or illustrated. I used to have a calendar that was a Black History calendar, and it was Frank Morrison's art, and I loved that calendar, but I don't know where it went or if he makes a new one every year. This book right here was published in the year 2020, so it is about 2 years old. It has a picture of farmland. So it starts off with in 1921, and George Washington Carver is talking to the U.S. Congress. This is him as an elderly man. He says, "We are just beginning to learn the value of the peanut," Carver told the congressman. Some of them laughed. One made a racist remark. As a black man speaking to a room of all white representatives, Carver was not among friends. African Americans were still segregated by the U.S. federal law and treated as second-class citizens. Carver had only been given 10 minutes to speak. He gave the audience 10 minutes they would never forget. So, I have a lot to say about just this first page alone. A lot of people, they don't research about George Washington Carver. They just know him for the peanut. But George Washington Carver, I believe, was like a polymath. I personally believe he was a polymath. He knew plants. He was very, I don't know if he was religious or spiritual. He would have visions. He was also an incredible painter. You can see some of his work that he made online. He had a painting of flowers. I read somewhere that he wrote poetry. He would have like Bible study. I've also read somewhere that he could sing. He did a lot with community building. He was just a very interesting person, and I just feel that a lot of people just confine him to the peanut, but that was just one thing that he found multiple uses for. Anyway, it says Carver showed them how peanuts could be used to make dozens of items, including face creams, soaps, ink, cheese, instant coffee, paper, paints, glue, and much more. When his time was up, they were impressed. The chairman encouraged him to continue. "Go ahead, brother. Your time is unlimited." Carver spoke for over an hour. Now, me personally, I have I need to read about this this occurrence in history. Like, you know, sometimes an author will read something and they'll know all the information, but they'll condense it down for the children. I need to read of this actual event. I want to see the transcripts, everything, if they even had it transcribed. Because you're not about to come over here and diss me and I'm sharing all of my ideas to help you. It's just not going to happen. No. 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 I will never work with you again. I think that's a problem that we as Black people have had, where we just giving our pearls to people who just don't care. And sometimes the people aren't in our outside of our community. Sometimes it's in our community, you know, like your heart is so giving and you're giving to people who don't really care. Like, why? I don't know. I feel George Washington Carver was wiser and more compassionate than I am, because I'm not about to give you nothing. No, you don't like it? You want to disrespect me? Okay, I'll just take all of my valuables and all of my jewels, and I'm going to go over there, and you're not going to get nothing. I'll just keep it all to myself. You don't deserve my pearls. Personally, I did that to the, I'm not going to name them, but I did that to the scholarship fund that I used to donate my art to when I donated art to them for years, like 3, 4, 5 years. Every year I donate art to them, and because I was so young, I would get half and the other would get half to go to the scholarship fund. It was like Black people in science, and one year they did not pay me, so I came the next year, and I'm in a group of scientists, and these scientists, one of them laughs and says, hey, haha, that's the artist who we haven't paid yet. And did you know I didn't go back? I did not donate another painting until maybe 10 years later, just because I was like, okay, I'm over it. I'll hold a grudge for that long. But yeah, that's how I feel about it. It says, from the time he was a boy, he had a deep desire to share what he knew. So then, why did he once have a secret garden? So it's a flashback. It's Diamond Grove, Missouri, 1874. You know what's interesting? Even though I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, a lot of people that I met in town did not know Dr. Carver was from Missouri. They didn't even know that there's actually a state park, or I don't know if it's a national park or state park for him in his honor. Some people don't even know there's a Carver garden at the Missouri Botanical Gardens in his honor. I don't know when they started the state park, but Diamond Grove, Missouri, which I assume may be by Kansas City, or I really want to go there. I've never been there before. So it talks about how he has his little secret garden, and he's a little boy, and he's just taking care of all of these beautiful flowers, all of these beautiful plants. I literally don't remember where I read where he would have visions for the plants or in relation to the plants. When I was reading about that, it kind of reminded me of the Dogon people who used to have this ritualistic dance that they would perform, I want to say every 50 years, that showed the germination of a seed and the stars and all of that. I feel he was very in tune with Mother Nature. And it mentions that people were like, why are you growing flowers? Why don't you grow something to eat? You can't make money selling flowers, and blah, 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 blah. They're just dissing him. I don't know how often that really happened, or if this was just creative license, but it's just people saying, you're wasting time growing flowers, which I can understand why they're saying that. But then at the same time, you can use flowers as food. Like you have herbal teas and different things. So, okay. You can create them into creams like calendula and chamomile and all of these different things. You can use them as medicine and tinctures to keep your illnesses away. So it says, you can't make money selling flowers. They're only good for attracting bees. This is what his brother James said. A lot of people don't know that George Washington Carver also had siblings as well. Very limited knowledge about him. Another great children's book about him is Carver, A Life in Poems by Marilyn Nelson. So, George Washington Carver, he was born in 1864. He was enslaved on the Carver farm with his brother and his mother. And I like that the author used enslaved, because a lot of people keep acting like it was an adoption when it really wasn't. Yeah, I mean, you're enslaved on the Carver farm. I don't know the background of the Carvers from the top of my mind. I want to say at least one of them, maybe Moses, was of German descent, but I'm not positive. So when he was a baby, him and his mother were kidnapped. Him on the horse being kidnapped. And he was found close to death and brought back to the Carvers. His mother was never seen again. The next year, slavery was outlawed in the United States. His mother's name was Mary. I don't know how old she was. She may have been young. She might have been under 20, but I'm really not sure because there's all these differing accounts about her. I also think that him being a sickly child was the reason for his vocal cords or the way his voice sounded. Because if you listen to Dr. Carver speak, his voice is very, very high. When I say his voice is high, his voice is literally higher than my voice and my mother's voice. My mother's voice is very high. It's like very high pitched. Some people say that he was castrated, and I personally don't know. I don't think he was castrated. I don't think he was castrated personally, because he like grew facial hair and different things. Like okay. That's what the documentary Hidden Colors was saying. They're like, oh, he was castrated, so he wouldn't touch the Carver's children. I'm like, I was done with that documentary. Because number one, what are you talking about? The Carvers didn't have any children, so how could they castrate him to not touch children that they didn't even have? People don't do their research, but whatever. I think what caused his voice to sound like that was the whooping cough, because it says, Moses and Susan Carver did not have children of their own and raised George and his brother on the farm. George was a sickly child, which meant less time working and more time exploring. I don't know if in the back it states, it says, as a child, George is often sick with whooping cough and croup. Croup? C-R-O-U-P. Doctors say he will not live past the age of 21. I think that's what caused his voice to be like that. Because if you're an infant coughing, maybe your vocal cords get damaged. So because he was, too physically weak to do these things, like to do the basic works, he had to spend most of his time with Susan Carver. And it says, Susan taught him how to be creative with the little they had. Nothing was wasted. Turkey feathers were used to make sewing needles. They made dyes from nuts and berries. They used plants and leaves for medicine. I'm wondering if his early upbringing also influenced like the way he painted, because it said they made dyes from nuts and berries. And remember, I told you he could paint. He also, could create art supplies out of the plants. Near the end of his life, they featured, I want to say it was Tuskegee, they featured some of the art pieces that he created. And he would go into the woods and he would read one book. It says George had only one book, which he read dozens of times. He said, I wish I could go to school, but, there's segregation. So he just spent most of his time in nature teaching himself about different things. I think that's why I connected with him, because I did the same thing as a child. Except my thing was I would spend hours either trying to invent things. I would spend hours trying to, I want to say, practice the occult, which I thought was kind of interesting. I would draw. That's what I draw now. I would write and organize things and just try to create little contraptions and new toys. It's amazing what a child can create if they're just left to their own devices. Like if you give them the materials, they can create whatever it is for the future. So he's out here taking care of his secret garden, and it says, in his mind, the garden was a true gift from God, whom he called the Great Creator. There is a quote on my painting above me, and it says, I love to think of nature, an unlimited station through which God speaks to us every hour if we only tune in. And that was George Washington Carver. Put that on my painting because I thought it was very profound. It says, come here, you need a haircut. George said as he cradled a daisy in his hand and clipped off its dry petals. He spread them around the soil to help the flowers grow. I thought that was pretty cool. It's almost like the natives, how they would bury fish in order to be used as fertilizer to make the plants, nourish. It's like composting. They're shoveling outside. At first, the gardening was difficult because he couldn't ask for help and reveal his secret. The more he experimented, the more he learned. George studied each new season by painting the life cycles of the flowers. Berries were used to make paints. Twigs and grass were used to make brushes. So see? I'm glad this book introduces the children to the other aspects of George Washington Carver. That he was a very magnificent painter. In fact, when he went to one college, how he got into the study of plants and different things. They say one of the professor's daughters was like, you paint flowers and you paint these plants, why not learn about them? But I don't know how true that is, I think he already had an interest in the plants. He learned how to protect the roots through the winter so flowers could be reborn in the spring. It was a special garden and could have remained secret, but eventually the young boy's generosity changed that. When George met a neighbor with a sick plant or flower, he offered to care for it. Part of his garden became a plant hospital, and, they started calling him the plant doctor. Look at all these black people lining up with their plants. Here comes the plant doctor, they'd say whenever he paid a visit. So, eventually, she wanted to expand and do bigger things. And it says, George knew there was much to see and learn away from the farm. At the age of 12, he said goodbye to his garden and set off on his own for a new adventure. That's really brave, honestly. Like the child, how many children do you know, or how many children have you known that ultimately just pick up their life and go somewhere else in order to be, advance in life? I've read about that only in cases of especially children who live in extreme poverty, or children who are just in a dire situation and they just need a change to move forward in life. I know Ida B. Wells Barnett did that when she was about 16. She became the sole caretaker of all of her siblings, and she orchestrated her life in such a way that everybody was taken care of, but she could also advance further in her career. So some children just have that drive. So he goes to Neosho, Missouri, and he lives with this black woman named Mariah Watkins, who gives him advice on childhood. Now, Mariah Watkins, I believe she had a school. It says, in 1876, he moves to Neosho, Missouri, to attend the Neosho Colored School. He lives with Andrew and Mariah Watkins. George chooses an official last name, Carver. So this is 1876. And he's basically 12 years old. And Mariah Watkins advises him, learn all you can, George, then give it all back to our people. This is her. So over the next 18 years, he lived in several states and attended many schools to study art and agriculture. So let's see. So he stays with Mariah and her husband from 1876 till I don't know when. So in 1878, he moves to Fort Scott, Kansas, looking for a better education. He leaves that town after he witnesses a black man getting killed on the street. I believe I read that somewhere. I think he may have made a sod house or something, and I believe the black man was lynched, but I'm really not certain. So a year later, he moves to Olathe, Olathe, Kansas to attend school. He lives with Ben and Lucy Seymour and helps with their laundry business. A year later, he moves with them to Minneapolis, Kansas. Now, that's 1879. It's like a 3-year period where he's just trying so hard to get his education. So he gets accepted into Highland College in 1885. It's an all-white school, but they refuse him because, they find out he's black. In 1896, he became the first black man to study and graduate from and teach at Iowa Agricultural College. Well, this is him. Is that an Asian student? That looks like an Asian student. I wonder if they were allowed there too. Or maybe it was just the way he got painted. So it says, the same year, Booker T. Washington, president of the Tuskegee Institute, hired him to teach agriculture. When Carver first arrived, he said, everything looked hungry. The land, the cotton, the cattle, the people. Farmers were in trouble. Cotton crops were destroying their land. With little money and second-rate equipment, Carver built Tuskegee's first farming laboratory. Well, this is him, and this is George Washington, Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington, I still think, is a controversial figure. Either you hate him, or you love him, or you just try to have a balanced viewpoint of him. But I want to say it was Thomas Edison was trying to get George Washington Carver to work with him. And he said to him, I believe, you doubtless know that I come here solely for the benefit of my people, or something along those lines. And I feel Tuskegee was the best place for him because him and Booker T. Washington had basically been born to enslavement, I believe. And they're both very hard workers, very ambitious. So I feel that him going there was like home. At first he didn't like it. He says he wanted to study art because, he wanted to be an artist or work with art and his paintings and different things. However, thinking of the times and you're a black person during those times, your chances of success in art were kind of slim. So I really think his working at Tuskegee and taking the position that he had really helped him to advance in life and not have so many issues that he could have possibly had if he mainly focused on art. He experimented with new crops to replace cotton, like sweet potatoes and soybeans, but the peanut was the champion. It had nutrients to nourish and refresh the soil. He convinced farmers to grow peanuts and developed over 300 uses for them. It wasn't long before peanuts became the largest crop in the South. So basically, George Washington Carver saved the South. And I don't know why. Did these farmers know about crop rotation? Did they know that the cotton could deplete the soil? Did they know at that time? I don't know. This is what happens when you're very greedy and you're just growing one thing. I can understand why you grow cotton because it was a money maker, but still, you depleted the soil. You just made it dead. You didn't put anything back. The cotton just stripped and stripped and stripped away, just like it stripped away the humanity of the people who picked it. Another thing I thought was interesting was he had a, what do you call it? It's like an outreach wagon. It was called the Jessup Agricultural Wagon to visit poor farmers. So on this wagon, he had plants. He had pamphlets. Dr. Carver had hundreds of pamphlets, and he would go around and basically educate the people on how to be better in agriculture. Somebody locally, I want to say in St. Louis, wrote a book about George Washington Carver's wagon. I think she's from St. Louis, but I don't remember what the book was called. It's beautifully illustrated, but he would go around and show people all of these different things. It says it offered everything from tool demonstrations to medical care to pamphlets on how to improve farms and live healthier. In its first summer, the wagon visited over 6,000 people. Carver's advice saved countless farms and families. What would you like to learn today? He asked a farmer. The best time to plow or how to raise a strong cow? So he goes there and he's traveling. People try to come and hear him speak. You could consider him an early environmentalist, a voice for racial harmony, and an advisor to world leaders. With his new fame came many awards and honors, yet he remained a humble man, always ready to serve humanity. I know he made an oil out of peanuts. I think it was called penol, for President which one? Was it FDR? It might have been FDR. For his, oh my God, what did he have? It wasn't paralysis. I can't remember what it was called, but for his ailment, he created an oil to help with his ailment. So, the end of the book, it says, regard nature, revere nature, respect nature. And that's him as an old man. I thought it was a very beautiful book. In the back, as you can see, I was reading from a timeline. So if you are an educator or somebody that just loves learning more facts, this is the timeline of the book. In 1939, he was awarded an honorary membership from the American Inventors Society. And then in 1945, the U.S. Congress designates January 5th as George Washington Carver Recognition Day. So next January, I think we should do something to celebrate George Washington Carver Recognition Day. You also list in the book some further readings and a bibliography. Some of the books I recognize, there's George Washington Carver by Tonya Bolden, and that one was actually a really good book. And I wrote to her and she wrote back. Carver Life and Poems, that's another one that's really good. Cheryl Harness, the groundbreaking chance-taking life of George Washington Carver in science and invention in America. Cheryl Harness, she is so detailed. Like, she will draw all of the pictures. Just very meticulous with her work. That's why I like her work. And there was Jim Gigliotti, who was George Washington Carver. So that might be part of the George Washington or the Who Was series. So yeah, I would highly recommend this book. I think it is great if you are one who loves learning about Black history and botany. I would recommend it. I would also recommend you come to St. Louis maybe and go visit the Carver Garden. It's just a small garden, but it's very nice. Or if you're one that likes taking road trips and going camping, then you should visit the Diamond Grove, Missouri, where they have the, state park in honor of George Washington Carver. So thank you all for watching this video and have a beautiful, happy reading.